This rusty can is all you deserve, peasant. Grace Olson's cruel laughter echoed through the garage as Clara McFarland stood frozen by the garage door. Her emerald green maternity dress stretched tight over her 7-month belly, tears streaming down her face as she stared at the rusted Volkswagen Beetle they'd just thrown at her like scraps. The wealthy white family mocked. Who does she think she is? A gold digger trying to cash in. What they didn't know was that inside that worthless car lay the key to a $450 million secret that would expose every single one of them and the big lie they had been living in. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Rain hammered the stained glass windows of St. Augustine Cathedral while 300 guests filled the pews for Daniel Castro's funeral. At 26, Clara McFarland sat alone in the front row, her black dress stretched tight over her 7-month belly. Every breath hurt, not from pregnancy, but from the weight of 1,000 hostile stares boring into her back. She doesn't belong here. Someone whispered behind her. Clara's hands trembled as she placed them over her stomach. The baby kicked as if sensing her pain. 3 months ago, Daniel had been alive, holding her close in their small apartment in Koreatown, talking about baby names and painting the nursery yellow because they wanted to be surprised. Now she sat surrounded by his family's hatred, carrying his child alone. Grace Olson, Daniel's mother, glided past in her designer black suit, her silver hair pulled into a perfect chenin. She didn't acknowledge Clara's existence. Neither did Alex Nicholson, Daniel's brother, who stood at the podium delivering a eulogy that painted Daniel as a family man devoted to his true heritage and values. Daniel always understood the importance of family legacy, Alex said, his voice carrying across the cathedral. He knew that true wealth comes from preserving what generations before us built. Clara bit her lip until she tasted blood. Daniel had told her how his family downed him when he refused to marry Victor Quintana, daughter of a pharmaceutical dynasty. How they called him a disappointment for choosing love over an arranged marriage. How they blamed Clara for corrupting their golden boy. But Daniel never told her about the illness eating him alive from the inside. The funeral procession moved to Hillside Memorial Park, where the Castro family mausoleum stood like a marble fortress among the rolling green hills. Clara followed at a distance, feeling like an intruder at her own husband's burial. The November wind cut through her thin coat, but the cold inside her chest hurt worse than any weather. As dirt hit Daniel's mahogany casket, Clara whispered, "I love you. I'll love you forever." Just as Quintana, standing with the family, rolled her eyes. After the burial, the family gathered at the Castro estate in Bayer. Clara wasn't invited, but Grace's assistant called that afternoon with a message. "Mrs. Olson requests your presence for the will reading 4 sharp. Don't be late." The Castro mansion sprawled across 5 acres. Its Spanish colonial architecture, a monument to old California money. Clara had only been inside twice during her 2-year marriage to Daniel. Each visit felt like entering enemy territory. She parked her aging Toyota Camry between 2 Bentleys and walked through the front entrance, where a crystal chandelier cast rainbows across marble floors. Family members clustered in small groups, their conversations stopping when she appeared. "Look what the cat dragged in." Kelvin Mendez, Daniel's cousin, muttered to his wife. London Flores, Grace's sister, examined Clara from head to toe. "That dress is from Target, isn't it?" In the library, attorney Michael Bennett shuffled through papers while the family arranged themselves in leather chairs. Clara stood near the door, holding her purse like a shield. The baby kicked again, harder this time. "Now that everyone's here," Bennett began, "we can proceed with the reading of Daniel Castro's last will and testament." Bennett's hands shook as he opened the legal documents. "I must inform you that Mr. Castro made several amendments to his will in the weeks before his death. Significant amendments." Grace leaned forward. "What kind of amendments?" Bennett cleared his throat. He left detailed instructions for specific personal items to be distributed immediately after this reading. Before we addressed the main estate, the room fell silent, except for the grandfather clock's steady ticking. Clara pressed her hand to her stomach, wondering why her heart was racing. Something in Bennett's tone felt wrong. like he was hiding something enormous. To my beloved wife, Clara, Bennett read, his voice barely above a whisper, I leave my most treasured possession, the one thing that will ensure she never wants for anything. Every head in the room turned toward Clara. She had no idea that in less than an hour, that treasured possession would be a set of rusty keys to a car that would change everything. The grandfather clock struck 4:30 as Michael Bennett adjusted his reading glasses and opened the main will document. Clara remained standing by the door, her back pressed against the cold oak paneling. The baby had gone still inside her, as if even her unborn child could sense the tension crackling through the room. The estate of Daniel Castro, valued at approximately $47 million, is to be divided as follows, Bennett announced, his voice gaining strength now that he'd moved past the mysterious opening statement. Grace Olson sat straighter in her leather chair, her manicured fingers gripping the armrests. Alex Nicholson leaned forward, while just as Quintana smoothed her black pencil skirt with practiced elegance. The entire Castro family held their breath. To my mother, Grace Olson, I leave the sum of $15 million in the family estate in Bel Air, California. A collective exhale filled the room. Grace's lips curved into a satisfied smile. To my brother, Alex Nicholson, I leave $10 million and full ownership of Castro Industries' manufacturing division. Alex pumped his fist silently, sharing a triumphant look with his wife, London. To my cousins, aunts, and extended family members, I leave the remaining $22 million to be distributed equally among you. The room erupted in barely contained celebration. Family members hugged, whispered, "Congratulations!" and cast victorious glances toward Clara. She stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Bennett cleared his throat. That concludes the monetary distributions of the estate. Kelvin Mendes raised his hand. What about the girl? Every eye turned to Clara. She wanted to disappear into the mahogany bookcases to become invisible among the leather-bound volumes that had never welcomed her. Anyway, Bennett shuffled through his papers again, that same nervous energy returning to his movements. Mrs. McFarland, your husband left you a personal message. He pulled out a sealed envelope with Clara's name written in Daniel's familiar handwriting. He also specified that you should receive his most cherished possession, which is Grace demanded, her voice sharp as winter air. Bennett consulted his notes. A 1998 Volkswagen Beetle currently parked in the estate's rear garage. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before laughter exploded through the library. Victor Quintana covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with mirth. Alex slapped his knee, while London Flores actually wiped tears from her eyes. The Beetle. Kelvin gasped between laughs. He left her that piece of junk from college. Grace stood, her composure cracking just enough to reveal pure malicious delight. Oh, how precious. Daniel always was sentimental about that old car. She turned to Clara with mock sympathy. It barely runs, dear, but I'm sure you'll appreciate the gesture. Clara's throat closed. The envelope in her hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Around her, the laughter continued, a soundtrack of cruelty that would haunt her dreams. The car has been parked in our garage for 3 years, Grace continued, her voice dripping with false kindness. We were planning to have it towed to the junkyard, but I suppose Daniel saved us the trouble. She reached into her purse and pulled out a set of tarnished keys. Here you go, sweetheart. Don't say we never gave you anything. The keys felt ice cold against Clara's palm. She stared down at them, her vision blurring with unshed tears. The baby kicked suddenly, a sharp jab that made her gasp. Are you all right? Bennett asked, genuine concern creeping into his voice. She's fine, Alex said dismissively, just overwhelmed by her generous inheritance. More snickers rippled through the room. Clara forced herself to look up to meet their mocking stares. Where is the car? Servant's garage around back, Grace said, waving her hand as if shooing away an insect. Thomas Fisher, our groundskeeper, can show you the way. That is, if you can manage the walk in your condition. The cruelty hit like a physical blow. Clara clutched the keys tighter, feeling the metal edges bite into her skin. She wanted to scream, to throw the keys back in their faces, to tell them exactly what she thought of their $47 million and their designer clothes and their century of inherited wealth. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you," and turned toward the door. "Oh, Clara," Grace called sweetly, "you might want to have it towed. I doubt that old thing will make it to wherever you're planning to live now. The implication hung in the air like smoke. Now that Daniel was gone, Clara had no claim to the family, no right to their world, no reason to exist in their line of sight. She was dismissed, discarded, reduced to a pregnant woman with a broken-down car, and nowhere to go. Clara walked through the marble hallway on unsteady legs, past oil paintings of Castro ancestors who stared down at her with painted contempt. The sound of renewed celebration echoed from the library as family members discussed their windfalls and vacation plans. Outside, the November air bit through her thin coat. Thomas Pfizer, the groundskeeper, waited by a golf cart, his weathered face kind but distant. He was probably the only person on the estate who'd ever spoken to her without disgust. "Mrs. McFarland," he said quietly, "I'm sorry for your loss. Mr. Daniel was a good man." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Thomas drove her around the main house to a smaller building behind the pool house. The servant's garage sat hidden from the main estate, filled with lawn equipment and storage boxes. In the far corner, covered by a paint-stained tarp, sat the Volkswagen Beetle. Thomas pulled away the covering, revealing a car that had definitely seen better days. The yellow paint had faded to a sickly beige. Rust bloomed around the wheel wells, and a spiderweb crack spread across the passenger side of the windshield. The front bumper hung slightly, askew, held in place by what looked like wire and hope. "Mr. Daniel drove this all through college," Thomas said, running his hand along the dented hood. "He loved this little car, always said it had character." Clara stared at the vehicle that represented her entire inheritance. $47 million had flowed to Daniel's family like water, and she'd received a car that belonged in a scrapyard. "The engine runs," Thomas continued. "I've been starting it once a month to keep the battery alive. Mr. Daniel asked me to take care of it, said it was important." He paused, studying Clara's face. "He came out here a lot in his final weeks, spent hours just sitting in that car, sometimes talking on his phone." Something in Thomas's tone made Clara look up. "Talking to who?" "Don't know, but he was always real secretive about it. And he had me clean out the interior real thorough, like about 2 weeks before he passed. Had me vacuum every inch, wipe down every surface." Thomas scratched his graying head. Seemed odd at the time. Car hadn't been driven in months, but he wanted it spotless. Clara approached the Beetle slowly, her heels clicking against the concrete floor. Through the cracked windshield, she could see the interior looked surprisingly clean compared to the exterior's decay. The black vinyl seats were worn but intact, and someone had placed a small air freshener shaped like a pine tree on the rearview mirror. She inserted the key into the driver's side door. The lock turned easily, as if it had been recently oiled. The door opened with a metallic groan that echoed through the garage. The interior smelled like pine and something else, something familiar. Daniel's cologne. The scent hit her like a physical presence, so strong she had to grip the door frame to keep from collapsing. For a moment, she could almost believe he was there, could almost hear his voice telling her everything would be okay. But everything was not okay. Everything was broken, scattered, destroyed. Clara slid into the driver's seat, her pregnant belly pressed against the steering wheel. The vinyl felt cold through her dress. She placed her hands on the worn steering wheel where Daniel's hands had once been, and finally let the tears fall. Through her sobs, she heard Thomas's gentle voice. "Mrs. McFarland, there's something wedged behind the passenger seat. Looks like an envelope or something." Clara's tears stopped instantly. She twisted in her seat, ignoring the sharp pain in her lower back, and reached behind the passenger seat. Her fingers found something papery tucked deep in the gap between the seat and the back panel. She pulled out a manila envelope, sealed and unmarked, except for her name written in Daniel's handwriting across the front. The paper felt thick, expensive, nothing like the joke car it had been hidden in. Thomas stepped closer. "That wasn't there when I cleaned the car. Mr. Daniel must have put it there after." Clara stared at the envelope, her heart racing. Inside the library, Daniel's family was celebrating their millions, convinced they'd seen the last of the poor girl their son had foolishly married. They had no idea that the real game was just beginning. She looked up at Thomas, who was watching her with curious eyes. "Can you keep this between us?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am. Whatever Mr. Daniel left for you, it's none of my business to tell." Clara tucked the envelope inside her coat, feeling it crackle against her ribs. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if responding to her suddenly racing pulse. Maybe the rusty Volkswagen wasn't such a worthless gift after all. The family thought they'd won everything. But what could Daniel have hidden in that envelope? Share your theories in the comments and hit that subscribe button to find out what Clara discovers next. Clara sat in her studio apartment in Koreatown at 11:30 that night, staring at the manila envelope on her small kitchen table. The baby had finally settled after hours of restless kicking, as if even her unborn child understood the gravity of what lay before them. The apartment felt smaller than usual, cramped with the weight of grief and uncertainty. She'd driven the Beetle home from the Castro estate, listening to its engine weave and rattle with every mile. The car had indeed made it the 23 miles to her apartment, though the heater didn't work and the radio only picked up static. But it had carried her away from that marble prison of cruelty, and for that she felt grateful. Now, under the harsh fluorescent light of her tiny kitchen, she finally worked up the courage to open Daniel's final message. Inside the envelope, she found 3 items: a handwritten letter folded in thirds, a small silver key she didn't recognize, and a business card for First National Bank of Beverly Hills with a number written on the back in Daniel's careful script. The letter was dated 2 weeks before Daniel's death. My dearest Clara, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened, and I'm no longer with you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving you alone. I'm sorry for the pain you must be feeling. Most of all, I'm sorry for the lies. I was sick, Clara. Sicker than I ever told you. The doctor said I had 6 months when we first met, and I got almost 4 years instead. 4 beautiful years with you that I wouldn't trade for a century with anyone else. I never told you because I couldn't bear to see pity in your eyes where love had been. I couldn't stand the thought of you staying with me out of duty instead of desire. I wanted our time together to be real, untainted by the shadow of death. But my family never understood what we had. They saw only your skin color, your background, your bank account. They couldn't see your brilliant mind, your generous heart, your strength that puts their weakness to shame. They will try to destroy you now that I'm gone. They will try to take everything from you. Don't let them. The key in this envelope opens safety deposit box 1247 at First National Bank. The number on the card is my personal account code. Tell them Michael Bennett sent you and give them the code. They'll know what to do. What you'll find there will help you understand the full truth about my illness, about my family, and about the choice I made to protect you and our child from both. I love you, Clara. I love you with everything I was, everything I am, and everything I'll ever be. Take care of our baby. Give them the love my family never learned to give. Forever yours, Daniel. P.S. Trust no one from my family, not even the ones who seem kind. Clara's hands shook as she set the letter down. Daniel had been dying throughout their entire relationship. Every laugh they'd shared, every plan they'd made, every night he'd held her close, he'd known it was borrowed time. The magnitude of his sacrifice crashed over her like cold ocean waves. She picked up her phone and called First National Bank's customer service line, knowing they operated 24 hours for premium clients. A polished voice answered on the second ring. First National Bank, how may I assist you? I need to access a safety deposit box, Clara said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Box 147. Certainly. May I have your account verification code? Clara read the number from the back of the business card. She heard typing on the other end, then a pause. Mrs. McFarland, we've been expecting your call. Mr. Bennett left specific instructions. The box is accessible to you 24 hours a day. Would you like to schedule an appointment? Tonight? Can I come tonight? Of course. I'll have security escort you to the vault. Ask for Mark Walton when you arrive. Clara hung up and stared around her small apartment. In the corner sat the crib Daniel had assembled 3 months ago, still in pieces because they'd planned to finish it together. His coffee mug still sat in the sink, unwashed because she couldn't bear to erase that last trace of their normal life. But normal was gone forever. Whatever waited in that safety deposit box would either save her or destroy her completely. She grabbed her keys and headed back to the parking garage where the Beetle sat like a tired yellow guardian. The November night air cut through her thin jacket as she walked, and she realized she needed to buy a proper coat soon. Her savings account held exactly $437, enough for maybe 2 months of rent and groceries if she was careful. The drive to Beverly Hills took 30 minutes through mostly empty streets. The Beetle's engine wheezed more loudly in the cold, and she found herself talking to it like Daniel used to do with his old car back in college. "Come on, little fighter. Just get me there and back." First National Bank stood like a fortress of glass and steel on Wilshire Boulevard, its lobby gleaming under security lights. Clara parked in the visitor section and walked through the front entrance where Mark Walton waited behind the reception desk. He was a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that put her at ease immediately. "Mrs. McFarland, I'm so sorry for your loss," he said, standing to greet her. "Mr. Castro was a valued client for many years. Please follow me." They took an elevator to the basement level, where the vault stretched out like an underground city of metal boxes. Mark led her to box 1247, located in the premium section where the largest boxes were kept. "This is a double-wide box," Mark explained as he inserted his master key alongside Clara's key. "Mr. Castro upgraded it about 6 months ago. He came here quite frequently in his final weeks." The box opened with a soft click, revealing an interior much larger than Clara had expected. Inside, she found a treasure trove of documents, photographs, and sealed envelopes, all organized with a meticulous care that had characterized everything Daniel did. On top lay another letter with her name, this one marked "Read First." Mark discreetly withdrew to give her privacy, and Clara opened the second letter with trembling fingers. "Clara, what you're about to discover will shock you, but you need to know the truth about the illness that killed me and what it means for our child. I had Huntington's disease. It's genetic, progressive, and fatal. There is no cure. My father died from it when I was 12, though my mother told everyone it was a heart attack. She was ashamed. The Castro family has always been ashamed of any weakness, any flaw that might tarnish their perfect image. The disease has a 50% chance of being passed to children. I knew this when we decided to have a baby. And I knew I should have told you, but I was selfish. I wanted something good to come from my life before it ended. I wanted a part of us to continue. In this box, you'll find all my medical records, genetic testing results, and contact information for Dr. Olivia Webster at Cedars-Sinai. She's the leading expert on Huntington's disease and has been monitoring my case. She can perform tests on our baby to determine if they've inherited the gene. You'll also find financial records that my family doesn't know about. Property deeds, investment accounts, insurance policies, things I set up to protect you and our child from their cruelty. But most importantly, you'll find evidence of who my family really is underneath their charity galas and social standing. Evidence that will protect you if they try to challenge anything I've left you. Be careful, my love. They're more dangerous than you know. Daniel Clara's breath caught in her throat. Huntington's disease. She'd heard of it, knew it was devastating, but she'd never imagined it could touch her life so directly. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly. Their baby had a 50% chance of inheriting a death sentence. She began pulling documents from the safety deposit box, her shock growing with each revelation. Bank statements showed accounts in Daniel's name containing millions of dollars, far more than the $47 million his family had divided. Property deeds for houses in Malibu, Aspen, and the Hamptons, all purchased within the last 2 years. Insurance policies worth tens of millions, with Clara listed as the sole beneficiary. Then she found the photographs. The first showed Alex Nicholson shaking hands with a man Clara didn't recognize outside what appeared to be a warehouse. The timestamp showed the photo was taken 6 months ago. The second photo showed the same man handing Alex a briefcase. The third showed Victor Quintana meeting with the same mysterious man at a restaurant in downtown Los Angeles. At the bottom of the stack, she found a folder labeled Family Business in Daniel's handwriting. Inside were financial records showing that Castro Industries, the family's supposedly legitimate manufacturing company, had been losing money for years. But alongside those records were bank statements showing regular deposits into offshore accounts controlled by Alex and Victor. Deposits that didn't match any legitimate business income. The final document in the folder made Clara's blood run cold. It was a report from a private investigator detailing how the Castro family had been using their manufacturing facilities to launder money for organized crime families throughout Southern California. The operation involved false invoices, phantom employees, and a network of shell companies designed to hide the true source of millions of dollars in dirty money. Daniel had discovered his family's criminal activities. He'd gathered evidence, documented their crimes, and hidden it all away where they could never find it. And now that evidence belonged to Clara. She sat back in the small vault room, her mind reeling. The cruel family who had mocked her at the funeral, who had given her a broken-down car as an insult, had no idea that she now possessed the power to destroy them all. But even more shocking was what she found in the very last envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an official document from the California Secretary of State showing that 2 months before his death, Daniel had quietly transferred all of his shares in Castro Industries to Clara McFarland. She didn't just have evidence of their crimes. She owned 49% of the company they were using to commit those crimes. The baby kicked suddenly, a sharp reminder that she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for her child's future, for the legacy Daniel had died trying to protect. Outside the bank, dawn was breaking over Beverly Hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Clara loaded the documents into 2 large manila envelopes and carefully locked the safety deposit box. As she drove the wheezing Beetle back through the awakening city, she realized that everything had changed. The Castro family thought they'd gotten rid of her with their cruel laughter and rusty car keys. They thought she was just a poor girl from Koreatown with no power, no resources, no way to fight back. They had no idea how wrong they were. 3 days after the bank vault discovery, Clara sat in the sterile waiting room of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, clutching the genetic counseling pamphlet Dr. Olivia Webster had given her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead while other expectant mothers chatted softly about nursery colors and baby names. None of them were weighing whether their unborn child might carry a gene that would slowly destroy their brain. Dr. Webster had been kind but direct during their initial consultation the day before. The genetic test for Huntington's disease was simple, requiring only a small blood sample. The results would be definitive. Either the baby carried the gene and would develop the disease sometime in their 30s or 40s, or they didn't and would be completely free from this family curse. But once Clara knew, she could never unknow, and the decision of what to do with that information would rest entirely on her shoulders. Mrs. McFarland, a nurse, called from the doorway. "Dr. Webster will see you now." Clara followed the nurse down a corridor lined with inspirational posters about motherhood and new beginnings. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was carrying either a healthy baby who would live a full life or a child doomed to suffer the same fate that had killed their father. Dr. Webster's office overlooked the hospital's garden where November roses still bloomed despite the approaching winter. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and intelligent eyes that held both compassion and scientific precision. "Have you made a decision about the testing?" Dr. Webster asked, settling into her chair across from Clara. "I need to know," Clara said, surprised by the firmness in her own voice. "If my baby has the gene, I need time to prepare, to research treatments, to save money for their care, to understand what we're facing." Dr. Webster nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what your husband said when he first came to see me 4 years ago. He wanted to know everything, to be prepared for every possibility. You knew Daniel well. He was one of my most dedicated patients. He came for checkups every 3 months, participated in every research study we offered, donated generously to our Huntington's Research Fund." Dr. Webster pulled out a thick medical file. "He also left detailed instructions about your care and the baby's testing. He wanted you to have access to every resource, every experimental treatment, every piece of hope we could offer." The nurse drew Ila's blood while Dr. Webster explained the timeline. Results would take 1 week. If the baby tested positive for the gene, there were new treatments being developed. Gene therapies that might delay or even prevent the onset of symptoms. If the baby tested negative, they could live without ever worrying about Huntington's disease. "There's one more thing," Dr. Webster said as Clara prepared to leave. Your husband set up a research fund in your name, $5 million dedicated to finding a cure for Huntington's disease. He wanted you to have some say in how that money gets used. $5 million. Another secret fortune that Daniel had hidden from his family. Another piece of the puzzle that painted a picture of a man who had spent his final months methodically protecting the people he loved. Clara's phone buzzed as she walked to the hospital parking garage. A text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Coffee at Republic on Labra at 2 p.m. Come alone. This is about Daniel. She stared at the message, her heart rate quickening. Only a handful of people knew she was having genetic testing done. Either someone was watching her, or someone else knew about Daniel's illness. Republic buzzed with the usual Los Angeles lunch crowd when Hila arrived 20 minutes early. She chose a corner table where she could watch the entrance. Her purse containing the manila envelopes from the safety deposit box clutched tightly in her lap. The baby had been active all morning as if responding to her anxiety. At exactly 2, Michael Bennett walked through the restaurant's front door. Daniel's attorney looked different outside the family library. Less formal, but more nervous. He scanned the room until he spotted Clara, then approached her table with careful movements of a man who knew he was taking a dangerous risk. Thank you for coming, he said, sliding into the chair across from her. I wasn't sure you'd trust me enough to show up. Should I trust you? Clara asked directly. Bennett signaled the waitress for coffee before answering. That depends on what you found in the safety deposit box. The question hung between them like a challenge. Clara studied Bennett's face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but saw only worry and what might have been guilt. You knew about his illness, she said. It wasn't a question. Daniel told me about the Huntington's disease 2 years ago when he first asked me to help him restructure his assets. He was terrified that his family would try to have him declared mentally incompetent if they discovered his diagnosis. Huntington's patients sometimes face that challenge from greedy relatives. So you helped him hide money from his own family. Bennett leaned forward, lowering his voice. I helped him protect the woman he loved and the child he would never live to raise. There's a difference. He paused as the waitress delivered his coffee. How much do you know about the Castro family business? Clara's pulse quickened. What kind of business are we talking about? The kind that could get you killed if you're not careful. Bennett's words carried a weight that made Clara's skin crawl. Daniel discovered some things about Castro Industries that his family would do anything to keep secret. He was planning to expose them after he died to make sure they couldn't use their dirty money to hurt you or the baby. What kind of things? Bennett glanced around the restaurant, checking for anyone who might be listening. Money laundering, fraud, connections to organized crime families that go back decades. Daniel's father started it. His mother continued it. And now Alex and Victor are running the operation. How do you know all this? Because I've been their attorney for 15 years, and I've been looking the other way for 15 years. Bennett's voice carried deep shame. They paid me very well to ignore the inconsistencies, to draft documents that looked legitimate but served illegal purposes, to help them move money through offshore accounts. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November weather. Why are you telling me this now? Because Daniel asked me to. Because he knew that once he was gone, they'd come after you. And because I'm tired of being part of their criminal enterprise. Bennett reached into his jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. I've been documenting everything for the past 6 months. Every illegal transaction, every fraudulent document, every connection to criminal organizations. Daniel asked me to give this to you if anything happened to him. The recorder felt warm in Clara's palm, as if it contained fire instead of information. What am I supposed to do with this? That's up to you, but you should know that the family is getting suspicious. Grace hired a private investigator to follow you yesterday. They know you went to the bank. They know you met with Doctor. Got it. Let me know if you need further help with this or anything else. Daniel hadn't left her with nothing. His family had stolen her inheritance and made her believe her husband had abandoned her. Why didn't you say something during the reading? Because I was terrified. Because I knew what they were capable of, and I didn't want to end up like the other people who had crossed them. Bennett looked ashamed, but Daniel's last words to me were, "Take care of Clara. I can't do that if I stay silent forever." After Bennett left, Clara sat alone at the corner table, staring at the digital recorder and trying to process everything she'd learned. Her husband had died, protecting her from a family of criminals who had then stolen her inheritance through forgery and fraud. They were now having her followed, possibly planning to silence her permanently if she became too much of a threat. But she wasn't the helpless victim they thought she was. She owned 49% of their criminal enterprise. She had evidence of their illegal activities, and she had a recording that could bring down their entire operation. The question was whether she was brave enough to use what she knew, or smart enough to stay hidden until she figured out how to protect herself and her baby from people who had already proven they would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. As she walked back to the parking garage, Clara noticed a black SUV that had been parked across from the restaurant when she'd arrived. Now, it was gone, but she could swear she'd seen the same vehicle outside the medical center earlier that morning. They were definitely watching her. The question was what they planned to do about it. 1 week later, Clara's hands shook as she stared at the sealed envelope from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The genetic test results had arrived by courier at exactly 9 in the morning, and she'd been holding the envelope for 3 hours without opening it. The baby's future, their entire life trajectory, waited inside those folded papers. She sat cross-legged on her living room floor, surrounded by copies of all the documents she discovered in Daniel's safety deposit box. Over the past week, she'd organized everything into careful piles: financial records, property deeds, criminal evidence, and Bennett's digital recordings. She'd also noticed the black SUV parked outside her apartment building every day, sometimes with different drivers, but always watching. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Webster. "Results ready whenever you are. No pressure. Take your time." Clara took a deep breath and tore open the envelope. The medical jargon filled most of the page, but the crucial information stood out in bold letters. Genetic analysis. Negative for Huntington's disease mutation. Her baby was free. Free from the disease that had killed Daniel. Free from the genetic curse that had haunted the Castro family for generations. Tears of relief streamed down her face as she pressed the test results to her chest. At least one battle had been won. The relief was interrupted by 3 sharp knocks on her apartment door. Clara froze, quickly gathering the scattered documents and shoving them under her couch cushions. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "Clara McFarland, this is Detective Aria Laura with the Los Angeles Police Department. We need to speak with you about your late husband." Clara's pulse spiked. She checked the peephole and saw a tall woman in a dark jacket holding a police badge. Behind her stood a younger man in a similar jacket, both looking official and serious. She opened the door with the chain still attached. "Can I see some identification?" Detective Laura held up her badge while her partner did the same. "I'm Detective Laura. This is Detective Brian Henry. We're investigating some financial irregularities connected to your husband's estate. May we come in?" Clara's mind raced. Financial irregularities could mean they discovered the Castro family's criminal activities, or it could mean the family had reported her for accessing Daniel's accounts. Either way, talking to police without a lawyer seemed dangerous. What kind of irregularities? Detective Henry stepped forward. "Large money transfers in the weeks before your husband's death. Offshore accounts that weren't disclosed during probate. We're trying to determine if any laws were broken. I don't know anything about offshore accounts," Clara said, which was technically true. She knew about the accounts, but hadn't known about them until after Daniel's death. "Mrs. McFarland, we understand you recently accessed a safety deposit box registered to your husband," Detective Laura said. "We'd like to know what you found there." The question felt like a trap. If she admitted to finding evidence of criminal activity, she might implicate herself in money laundering charges. If she lied to police, she could face obstruction of justice charges later. "I think I should call a lawyer before we continue this conversation." The detectives exchanged glances. Detective Henry pulled out a business card. "That's your right, ma'am. but we'd appreciate your cooperation in this investigation. If your husband was involved in illegal financial activities, you could be considered a victim rather than a suspect. After the detectives left, Clara immediately called Michael Bennett. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting for her call. They came to you too, didn't they? Bennett said without preamble. Two detectives asking about offshore accounts and the safety deposit box. How did they know about any of that? Because Grace reported suspicious financial activity to the police yesterday. She claimed that large sums of money disappeared from Daniel's accounts after his death, and she suggested you might have stolen them. Clara sank onto her couch, feeling trapped from all sides. Can she do that? She can report her suspicions, but she doesn't have proof of theft because technically you haven't stolen anything. The accounts and safety deposit box were legally accessible to you as Daniel's widow. Bennett paused. But there's something else. The police aren't just investigating missing money, they're investigating Daniel's death. The words hit Clara like ice water. What do you mean? Someone suggested that Daniel's death wasn't entirely natural, that maybe someone accelerated his decline or interfered with his medical care. That's impossible. I was with him when he died. The doctors said his condition had progressed faster than expected, but that happens with Huntington's disease. I know that, and you know that. But if the family can plant doubt about the circumstances of his death, they can challenge everything he left you. They can claim you influenced him while he was mentally compromised, or even that you hastened his death to access his fortune. Clara's world tilted again. Not only were they trying to frame her for financial crimes, they were suggesting she'd murdered her own husband. The cruelty was breathtaking, even by Castro family standards. What should I do? Meet me at my office in 1 hour. Bring everything you found in the safety deposit box. We need to go on the offensive before they destroy you completely. Bennett's law office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower in Century City. Clara arrived carrying 2 large bags filled with documents, feeling like she was smuggling state secrets through enemy territory. The black SUV had followed her from Koreatown, maintaining a careful distance, but never losing sight of her car. Bennett's office overlooked the city, its walls lined with law books and framed diplomas that spoke to decades of legal experience. He cleared his conference table and began spreading out Clara's documents, organizing them with the efficiency of someone who understood exactly what they were looking at. "This is incredible," he murmured as he examined the photographs of Emilar meeting with known criminals. "Daniel was more thorough than I realized. Is it enough to stop them from framing me? It's enough to destroy them completely." Bennett held up bank statements showing millions in illegal transactions. But using this evidence means going to war with people who have already proven they'll do anything to protect themselves. Clara thought about the genetic test results in her purse, about the healthy baby growing inside her, about the life she wanted to build away from this nightmare. What if I just disappear? Take the money Daniel left me and start over somewhere else. They won't let you disappear. You know too much, and now you own too much. 49% of Castro Industries makes you a major shareholder in their criminal enterprise. They can't afford to let you walk away. A soft knock interrupted their conversation. Bennett's assistant appeared in the doorway looking concerned. "Mr. Bennett, there are 2 police detectives here to see you. They say it's urgent." Bennett and Clara exchanged worried glances. "Send them in," he said, quickly gathering the most incriminating documents and sliding them into his desk drawer. Detective Laura and Henry entered the office with the confidence of people who held all the cards. Detective Laura carried a manila folder that she placed on the conference table. "Mr. Bennett, Mrs. McFarland, thank you for seeing us. We have some new information about Mr. Castro's death that we'd like to share with you." Detective Henry opened the folder and pulled out a medical report. The coroner has completed a more detailed analysis of Mr. Castro's tissue samples. They found unusually high levels of a medication that accelerates neurological decline in Huntington's patients. Clara's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "We're saying that someone may have been giving your husband medication that made his condition worse. Medication that hastened his death." Detective Laura studied Clara's face carefully. The question is, Who had access to give him those medications? The implication hung in the air like smoke. As Daniel's wife and primary caregiver, Clara would have had the most opportunity to poison him. The family had found a way to frame her not just for financial crimes, but for murder. "This is ridiculous," Bennett interjected. "Mrs. McFarland loved her husband. She would never hurt him." "Love and money don't always go together," Detective Henry said, "especially when there's as much money involved as we're talking about here." Detective Laura leaned forward. "Mrs. McFarland, we know you accessed significant financial resources after your husband's death, resources that his family claims you shouldn't have had access to. If you cooperated with our investigation, if you helped us understand how these financial transfers happened, it would go a long way toward establishing your innocence in the matter of his death." Clara understood the offer. Confess to financial crimes and they'd protect her for murder charges. Admit guilt to something she didn't do in order to avoid being framed for something even worse. "I need time to think about this," she said. "Of course, but don't take too long. Murder investigations move quickly once we have a suspect." After the detectives left, Bennett poured himself a scotch with shaking hands. "They are closing the trap. Financial crimes, murder charges, character assassination. They're going to destroy you piece by piece until you have nothing left to fight with." Clara stared out at the Los Angeles skyline, thinking about the healthy baby growing inside her and the evidence that could free them both. The Castro family had underestimated her from the beginning, assuming she was too weak, too poor, too naive to fight back. They were about to discover how wrong they'd been. "No," she said, turning away from the window. "They've made one critical mistake." "What's that?" Clara pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. "They think I'm the victim in this story, but I'm not the victim anymore." She dialed the number for investigative journalist Emma Gilbert at the Los Angeles Times, the reporter who had built her career exposing corruption among the city's wealthy elite. "Ms. Gilbert, this is Clara McFarland. I have a story for you about the Castro family that will change everything you think you know about organized crime in Los Angeles." Bennett stared at her with something approaching admiration. "You're really going to do this? They want a war?" Clara said, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "They're about to get one." Emma Gilbert's office at the Los Angeles Times resembled a war room more than a newsroom. Stacks of investigative files towered on every surface. White bars connected names, dates, and photographs of Los Angeles' most powerful families pinned to corkboards like targets in a shooting gallery. When Clara arrived the next morning carrying her bags of evidence, she felt like she was entering the command center for a revolution. "Mrs. McFarland," Emma said, standing to greet her. The journalist was younger than Clara had expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "I've been investigating the Castro family for 2 years. Every lead goes cold. Every witness disappears or changes their story. Tell me you have something different." Clara set her bags on Emma's conference table. "I have everything." For the next 3 hours, Clara laid out the entire conspiracy while Emma recorded every word and photographed every document. The financial records showing millions in laundered money, the photographs of family members meeting with known criminals, Bennett's recordings of illegal transactions, the forged will that had stolen her inheritance, the planted evidence designed to frame her for murder. "This is explosive," Emma said, reviewing the bank statements for the 3rd time. "But I need corroboration. The Castro family has powerful lawyers and political connections. If I publish this without ironclad proof, they'll destroy both of us. What kind of proof do you need?" Emma pointed to the photographs of Alex meeting with the unknown criminal contact. "I need to identify this man and get him on record. I need independent verification of these financial transactions from sources outside your evidence. And I need someone from inside the family willing to go on record about their criminal activities." "That's impossible. The family would never turn on each other. Maybe not voluntarily." Emma's smile was sharp as a blade. "But people make mistakes when they're desperate. And according to your evidence, they're getting very desperate." That afternoon, Emma began making phone calls to her network of sources throughout Los Angeles law enforcement and the financial industry. Within hours, she'd identified the mysterious man in Alex's photographs as Mark Walton, a mid-level enforcer for the Torino crime family who specialized in money laundering through legitimate businesses. Walton was arrested 6 months ago on federal racketeering charges, Emma explained to Clara over the phone. He's looking at 20 years unless he cooperates with federal prosecutors. If we can prove he was working with Castro Industries, he might be willing to trade information for a lighter sentence. While Emma worked her sources, Clara returned to her apartment to find her world turned upside down. Her front door hung open, the lock shattered. Inside, every drawer had been pulled out, every closet emptied, every piece of furniture overturned. The intruders had been thorough but not careful, leaving destruction in their wake like a tornado. Her hands shook as she called Bennett. They broke into my apartment. They destroyed everything. Are you hurt? Are you safe? I'm fine, but they were looking for something specific. All the hiding places where someone might keep documents have been torn apart. Thank God you have everything with you. Stay away from the apartment tonight. Check into a hotel under a different name and pay cash. Clara was packing a bag when her neighbor, Mrs. Margaret Collier, appeared in her doorway. The elderly woman looked frightened but determined. "Honey, I saw who did this," she whispered, glancing around nervously. 3 men in expensive suits. They had a key to your apartment, like they'd made a copy, somehow. Did you recognize them? One of them looked like that man from the society pages. The one whose brother died recently. Alex something. Alex Nicholson had personally broken into her apartment. The family wasn't just watching her anymore. They were actively searching for the evidence that could destroy them. The fact that they'd risked such direct action meant they were running out of time and options. Clara checked into a small boutique hotel in West Hollywood, paying cash and registering under the name Anne Rodriguez. She was settling into her room when Emma called with news that made her blood run cold. The federal prosecutors working the Torino case want to meet with you tomorrow. Mark Walton confirmed that he's been laundering money through Castro Industries for 3 years. He's willing to testify in exchange for witness protection. What does that mean for me? It means you're about to become the star witness in a federal racketeering case. It also means you're in more danger than ever. Once the Castro family realizes you've talked to federal prosecutors, they'll know their only option is to silence you permanently. That evening, alone in her hotel room, Clara felt the full weight of what she'd set in motion. She wasn't just fighting for her inheritance anymore. She was bringing down a criminal empire that had operated with impunity for decades. The people she was challenging had killed before and wouldn't hesitate to kill again. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. The genetic test results sat in her purse, a reminder that at least one battle had been won. Her child would be born free from Huntington's disease, free to live a full and healthy life. But only if Clara could keep them both alive long enough for that life to begin. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop what you're doing or face the consequences. Last warning." Clara stared at the message, her heart pounding. They knew where she was, knew what she was planning, and were making their final threat. Tomorrow's meeting with federal prosecutors would either save her life or seal her fate. She was typing a response when her phone rang. Michael Bennett's voice was tight with fear. "Clara, you need to get out of Los Angeles tonight. I just learned that there's a contract on your life. Professional killers, not family members. They're planning to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. How do you know this? Because they asked me to provide them with information about your daily routines, your address, your car. They wanted me to help them find you." Clara's vision blurred with terror. "What did you tell them?" "I told them I didn't know where you were staying, but they're not going to give up. They have too much at stake. I can't run forever. If I disappear now, they win. They keep their criminal empire. They keep the money they stole from me. And they get away with trying to frame me for murder. Better alive and poor than dead and rich." Clara looked out her hotel window at the glittering lights of Los Angeles. The city where she'd met Daniel, fallen in love, and lost everything. The city where powerful families like the Castros had operated above the law for generations, crushing anyone who threatened their empires. No, she said, her voice growing stronger. I'm not running. I'm going to that meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to tell the federal prosecutors everything. If they want to kill me, they'll have to do it in front of the FBI. Clara, please think about your baby. I am thinking about my baby. I'm thinking about the world I want them to grow up in. A world where people like the Castros can't destroy innocent families just because they have money and power. After Bennett hung up, Clara sat in the darkness of her hotel room, listening to the distant sounds of traffic and thinking about courage. She'd never considered herself a brave person. She was just a girl from Koreatown who'd fallen in love with a rich man and gotten swept up in his family's hatred. But grief had a way of burning away everything except what mattered most. And what mattered most was justice for Daniel, protection for their child, and making sure no one else suffered what she'd endured. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. We know where you are. Room 412, Hotel Angelino. You have until midnight to reconsider. They weren't just threatening her anymore. They were telling her they could reach her anywhere, anytime. That no hiding place was safe. The message was clear. Surrender or die. Clara packed her bag, gathered her evidence, and prepared to leave. But she wasn't running away from Los Angeles. She was running toward the FBI field office, where she would spend the night under federal protection until her meeting with prosecutors in the morning. As she walked through the hotel lobby, she noticed two men in dark suits sitting in the lounge, their eyes following her movement. She forced herself to walk normally to show no fear. Even as her heart hammered against her ribs in the parking garage, she heard footsteps echoing behind her, getting closer with each step. She reached her car and fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit them in the lock. Mrs. McFarland. She spun around to find a young man in an FBI windbreaker standing behind her, his badge clearly visible. Agent Thomas Pfizer, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We've been assigned to provide you with protection. If you'll come with us, we'll escort you to a safe location. Behind Agent Fisher stood three other federal agents, all armed, all looking like they meant business. Relief flooded through Clara so completely she nearly collapsed. How did you know where I was? We've been monitoring communications related to the Castro investigation. When we intercepted threats against your life, we moved to provide protection. Agent Pfizer gestured toward a black SUV with government plates. We'll take you to a secure location where you can rest before tomorrow's testimony. As the FBI vehicle pulled out of the hotel parking garage, Clara saw the two men from the lobby running toward a white sedan. Their plan to intercept her foiled by federal intervention. The war was about to begin, but at least now she had an army fighting alongside her. The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles resembled a fortress. On the morning of December 3rd, 2024, FBI agents positioned themselves at every entrance while news vans from major networks lined the street outside. Word had leaked about the Castro family investigation, and the media sensed blood in the water. Clara sat in a secure conference room on the building's 7th floor, reviewing her testimony with federal prosecutor David Christian. At 38, Christian had built his career prosecuting organized crime families, and his confidence radiated the kind of calm authority that came from winning cases that seemed impossible. The defense will try to paint you as a gold-digging widow who fabricated evidence to steal from your husband's family, Christian explained, spreading photographs across the conference table. They'll claim you had motive to kill your husband for his money, and that you're framing his family to cover your own crimes. Clara studied the photos of Alex meeting with Mark Walton, the images that would serve as the prosecution's smoking gun. How do we prove these meetings were about money laundering and not legitimate business? Walton's testimony. He's agreed to explain exactly how the Castro family has been washing money for the Torino crime syndicate for the past 5 years. Bank records show millions flowing through fake invoices and phantom employees. Your husband's evidence gives us the paper trail we need to prove every transaction. Agent Thomas Fisher appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. We have a problem. Michael Bennett is missing. The words hit Clara like ice water. What do you mean missing? He didn't show up for his scheduled testimony this morning. When agents went to his home, they found signs of a struggle. His car is gone, his office has been ransacked, and his cell phone is turned off. Christian cursed under his breath. Bennett's testimony was crucial for establishing the timeline of the forged will. Without him, we have Clara's word against the family's lawyers. There's more, Fisher continued. Mark Walton's handler called an hour ago. Walton is refusing to testify. He claims he's received new information that makes him reconsider his cooperation agreement. Clara felt the case collapsing around them. The two key witnesses who could corroborate her evidence had vanished or been silenced. Without their testimony, she would be standing alone against the full power of the Castro family's legal team. What about the physical evidence, the bank records, the photographs, the recordings? Defense will claim everything was fabricated or taken out of context, Christian said grimly. Juries are skeptical of evidence that comes from interested parties, especially widows with financial motives. So, what do we do? Clara asked. Christian was quiet for a long moment, studying the evidence scattered across the table. We proceed with your testimony and hope it's compelling enough to convince the grand jury to issue indictments. Once the family members are arrested, someone might break and agree to cooperate. 2 hours later, Clara sat in the witness chair, facing a grand jury of 23 citizens who would decide whether the Castro family should face criminal charges. The room was smaller and less formal than she'd expected, but the weight of responsibility felt enormous. For 3 hours, she told her story. Daniel's hidden illness, his family's racism and cruelty, the discovery of criminal evidence in the safety deposit box, the forged will that stole her inheritance, and the attempts to frame her for murder. She spoke clearly and directly, letting her pain and anger fuel her words. The grand jurors asked thoughtful questions about dates, amounts, and her relationship with Daniel. Several seemed particularly interested in the genetic testing results, which proved she'd had no idea about Daniel's illness until after his death. Mrs. McFarland, one juror asked, why didn't you go to police immediately when you discovered evidence of criminal activity? Because I was afraid, Clara answered honestly. The Castro family has connections throughout Los Angeles. They'd already managed to have me investigated for crimes I didn't commit. I wasn't sure who I could trust. When her testimony concluded, Prosecutor Christian seemed cautiously optimistic. You did well, the jury was engaged, and your story was consistent with the evidence. We should have a decision within 48 hours. But as they left the courthouse, Agent Pfizer received a call that changed everything. Michael Bennett's body was found an hour ago in Griffith Park. He told them quietly. Single gunshot to the head, execution style. His car was discovered burned out in a parking lot in Riverside County. Clara's legs nearly gave out. Bennett had died because he tried to help her, because he'd finally found the courage to do the right thing after years of complicity in the Castro family's crimes. There's something else, Pfizer continued. We intercepted communications indicating that there's a backup plan if the grand jury issues indictments. The family is prepared to eliminate any remaining witnesses, including you. What kind of backup plan? They've hired a team of professionals from out of state, ex-military contractors who specialize in making problems disappear. The contract specifies that it should look like an accident. Christian's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and went pale. The grand jury has reached a decision. They want to announce it this afternoon. The grand jury room was packed when they reconvened at 4. Clara sat in the gallery behind the prosecutor's table, flanked by federal agents who scanned every face in the crowd for potential threats. The grand jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes, stood to read their decision. In the matter of Castro Industries and related defendants, we find sufficient evidence to support the following charges: conspiracy to commit racketeering, money laundering, fraud, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit murder. A collective gasp filled the room. The charges were more severe than even the prosecutors had hoped for. We issue indictments for Grace Olson, Alex Nicholson, Victor Quintana, and 12 additional defendants connected to this criminal enterprise. Clara closed her eyes and felt a moment of pure relief. The grand jury had believed her testimony. The Castro family would finally face justice for their crimes, but her relief was short-lived. As the crowd dispersed, Agent Pfizer leaned close to her ear. We need to get you out of here immediately. Our surveillance team spotted 3 individuals matching the description of the hired contractors. They're positioned outside the building. They exited through the courthouse's underground garage, where a convoy of FBI vehicles waited to escort Clara to a new safe house. As their car pulled into downtown traffic, she saw news vans racing toward the Castro estate in Bexar, ready to capture the family's arrest. Her phone buzzed with a call from Emma Gilbert at the Los Angeles Times. "Clara, I'm outside the Castro estate right now. Federal agents are arresting family members, but there's something you need to know. Grace Olson isn't here. According to neighbors, she left this morning with several suitcases and hasn't returned." Grace had run. The family matriarch, the woman who had orchestrated the cruelty at Daniel's funeral and the attempts to frame Clara for murder, had disappeared rather than face justice. Where could she go? She has properties all over the world, accounts in countries that don't extradite to the United States. If she's smart, she's already out of the country. Agent Pfizer was listening to the call through the car speaker system. "We've issued a federal warrant and contacted Interpol. She can run, but she can't hide forever." That evening, Clara sat in her new safe house in Pasadena, watching news coverage of the Castro family arrests. Alex Nicholson and Victor Quintana were led away in handcuffs, their faces covered to hide their shame. Federal agents carried boxes of evidence out of Castro Industries' headquarters, while reporters speculated about the scope of the criminal enterprise. But even as she watched her tormentors face consequences, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. Grace Olson was still free, still dangerous, and still capable of ordering Clara's death from wherever she was hiding. Her phone rang at 11 that night. An unknown international number. "Hello, Clara." Grace's voice was calm, almost pleasant, as if she were calling to chat about the weather. Clara's blood turned to ice. Agent Fisher, who was monitoring the call, began frantically signaling his team to trace the number. "I have to admire your tenacity," Grace continued. "You've destroyed my family, cost us hundreds of millions of dollars, and sent my son to prison. Quite impressive for a little girl from Koreatown." "Your family destroyed themselves. I just told the truth about what you did." "The truth?" Grace laughed coldly. "The truth is that you seduced my dying son, stole his fortune, and then fabricated evidence to cover your crimes. That's the truth I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving." The grand jury didn't see it that way. Grand juries can be wrong. Witnesses can be discredited. Evidence can be challenged. Grace's voice turned deadly serious. "I'm going to destroy you, Clara. Not quickly, not cleanly, but slowly and thoroughly. I'm going to take apart everything you think you've won, piece by piece, until you have nothing left." The line went dead, leaving Clara staring at her phone in the silence of the safe house. Agent Fisher finished his call with the trace team. She called from a burner phone in the Cayman Clarence. Probably ditched it as soon as she hung up, but the threat was clear enough to justify keeping you in protective custody indefinitely. Clara placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly inside her. The grand jury had issued indictments. The family was facing justice, and she should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt like she was trapped in a nightmare that would never end. The Castro Empire is crumbling, but Grace is still out there, planning her revenge. 6 weeks after the grand jury indictments, Clara sat in her third safe house, a modest ranch home in Riverside County, surrounded by orange groves and federal agents. The baby was due in 8 weeks, and her doctor visits required a convoy of FBI vehicles that made her feel more like a prisoner than a protected witness. The trials were scheduled to begin in January 2025, but Grace's shadow loomed over everything. 3 more witnesses connected to the Castro investigation had died in the past month. A former Castro Industries accountant in a suspicious car accident, a bank manager who'd processed illegal transfers found dead of an apparent heart attack, a private investigator who'd gathered evidence for Daniel killed in what police called a home invasion robbery. Agent Fisher knocked on her bedroom door at 7 in the morning, his expression grim. "We need to talk." Clara found him in the kitchen with prosecutor David Christian, both men looking like they'd been up all night. Christian's usually perfect appearance was rumpled, his tie loose and his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. We have intelligence that Grace is planning something for Christmas Day, Christian said without preamble. Our sources indicate she's hired a team of mercenaries to extract you from federal protection. Extract me? What does that mean? Kidnapping? Fisher said bluntly. The plan involves taking you alive, forcing you to recant your testimony, and then eliminating you in a way that looks like suicide. A pregnant widow overcome with guilt about falsely accusing her late husband's family. Clara's hand moved instinctively to her belly. How do they plan to get past federal protection? Inside information. Someone in law enforcement is feeding them details about safe house locations, security protocols, and your movement schedules. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Even within the FBI, Grace had found someone willing to sell information that could get Clara killed. Christian leaned forward, his voice urgent. We want to relocate you again somewhere more secure. Federal prison, actually in protective custody until after the trials. Prison? I haven't committed any crimes. It's the only way to guarantee your safety. Minimum security facility, private cell, medical care for your pregnancy. You'd be completely isolated from any potential threats. Clara stared out the kitchen window at the orange trees heavy with fruit, thinking about spending the next 6 months locked in a cell while Grace Olson lived freely on some tropical island, planning her next move. For how long until we capture Grace, or until she's no longer a threat? Could be months, could be years. And my baby would be born in the prison medical facility. We'd arrange for proper care, but Christian trailed off. The implications clear. Clara's child would enter the world in a federal prison. Their first months spent behind walls and razor wire. All because their grandfather's family couldn't accept that their criminal empire had been exposed. There has to be another option. Fisher and Christian exchanged glances. There is, Fisher said slowly. But it's extremely dangerous. Tell me, we use you as bait. Set up a situation where Grace believes she can get to you, then capture her when she makes her move. Christian immediately objected. Absolutely not. We're not putting a pregnant witness in harm's way to catch a fugitive. The Department of Victor would never approve such an operation. What if it wasn't an official operation? Clara asked quietly. Both men stared at her. What are you suggesting? What if I made it look like I'd escaped from federal protection, like I'd gotten tired of hiding and decided to reclaim my life? Grace might come after me personally if she thought I was vulnerable. That's suicide, Christian said flatly. You have no training, no experience with dangerous situations, and you're 7 months pregnant. Even if we were monitoring from a distance, anything could go wrong. But Clara's mind was already working through the possibilities. She wants to destroy me personally, not just kill me from a distance. Her phone call made that clear. She wants to look me in the eyes when she takes everything away from me. And you want to give her that chance? I want to end this. My baby deserves to grow up free, not hiding from a woman who spent her entire life hurting people who threaten her power. Fisher studied Clara's face with the intensity of someone trying to read a dangerous situation. If we were hypothetically considering such a plan, what would you propose? Christmas Eve. Grace knows that's when I'd be most vulnerable, most likely to make an emotional decision to leave protection. I go back to my apartment in Koreatown. Make it look like I'm trying to return to my normal life. Your apartment was compromised weeks ago. That's the point. She'll know I'm there within hours, but instead of sending mercenaries, she'll come herself. She's too proud, too angry to let someone else have the satisfaction of destroying me. Christian was shaking his head before she finished speaking. Even if that were true, even if she came alone, what then? She's not going to politely surrender to federal agents. Then we make sure she doesn't have a choice. The next morning, Clara received a call that changed everything. Dr. Olivia Webster's voice was excited as she delivered news that made Clara's heart race. The genetic research fund your husband established has produced a breakthrough. We've developed a treatment that can prevent Huntington's disease symptoms entirely if administered before age 30. Clinical trials are starting next month, and early results are extraordinary. Daniel's final gift wasn't just money for research. It was hope for every family facing the same genetic curse that had killed him. The $5 million he'd set aside was already saving lives and would continue saving lives for generations to come. There's something else. Dr. Webster continued, "I've been contacted by investigators working on your case. They want to know if your husband ever mentioned concerns about his family's reaction to his illness. What kind of concerns? Specifically, whether he believed they might try to accelerate his death if they discovered his diagnosis. The investigators found evidence that someone had been tampering with his medication in his final weeks." Clara's breath caught. Tampering how? Adding compounds that would worsen his neurological symptoms and speed up his decline. If someone knew about his Huntington's disease, they could have killed him while making it look like natural disease progression. The implications crashed over Clara like cold waves. The Castro family hadn't just stolen her inheritance and tried to frame her for murder. They had actually murdered Daniel when they discovered he was dying anyway, ensuring he couldn't change his will or expose their criminal activities. That afternoon, against all FBI protocols and David Christian's desperate objections, Clara walked out of the Riverside safe house and drove the battered Volkswagen Beetle back to Los Angeles. She'd left a note explaining her decision and promising to cooperate with any charges that might result from her unauthorized departure from federal protection. But she couldn't spend her child's first months in a prison cell while Grace Olson lived freely, planning more murders and destroying more lives. Her Koreatown apartment looked exactly as she'd left it after the break-in. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, the remnants of a life interrupted by violence and fear. She began cleaning methodically, putting things back in their proper places, preparing for whatever was coming. As the December sun set behind the downtown skyline, Clara sat in the nursery she and Daniel had started to prepare before his death. The crib stood half-assembled, waiting for hands that would never return to finish the work. Her phone buzzed with text messages from Agent Feezer. "What the hell are you doing?" "Get back to the safe house immediately." Then from David Christian, "You've compromised the entire investigation. Federal marshals are en route to bring you back into custody." Finally, from an unknown international number, "I knew you'd come home eventually. See you soon." Grace was coming. Clara double-checked the locks on her apartment door and settled into Daniel's favorite chair to wait. The baby was active tonight, moving constantly as if sensing the approaching danger. Outside her window, Los Angeles spread out in all directions. 8 million people living their lives without knowing that in a few hours everything would be decided in a small apartment in Koreatown. The final battle was about to begin. And this time, there would be no federal agents to hide behind, no lawyers to speak for her, no safe houses to retreat to, just a pregnant woman, a dying woman's hatred, and the truth that had started this war in the first place. At 11:30 that night, Clara heard the soft scrape of metal against metal at her front door. Someone was picking the lock with professional skill, working slowly and quietly to avoid detection. She closed her eyes, placed both hands on her belly, and whispered a prayer for the child who would either grow up free or never know their mother's love. The door opened with barely a whisper of sound, and Grace Olson stepped into the apartment like death itself come calling. Grace Olson moved through Clara's apartment like a predator surveying her territory. Even at 62, she carried herself with the elegant menace of someone accustomed to power and violence. Her silver hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and she wore a black cashmere coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Hello, Clara," she said, settling into the chair across from where Clara sat. "You look tired. Pregnancy can be so exhausting, especially when you're carrying a bastard child." Clara forced herself to remain calm, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "How did you get past building security? Money opens every door, dear. The security guard downstairs has a gambling problem and 3 children to feed. $50,000 bought me 30 minutes of blindness. The FBI will be here soon. They're tracking my location." Grace smiled with genuine amusement. "Agent Fisher is currently investigating a suspicious vehicle outside a warehouse in San Pedro. My people made sure he received very credible intelligence about an imminent threat to your safety. It will take him at least 2 hours to realize he's been misdirected." The baby kicked sharply, as if responding to Clara's spike in adrenaline. Grace noticed the movement, and her smile turned cold. "Is it a boy or a girl? Why do you care?" Because I want to know what kind of stain my son left on this world before I clean it up. Clara's hands moved protectively over her belly. This baby is innocent. Whatever you think I've done, whatever revenge you want, it has nothing to do with an unborn child. Everything has to do with that child. Grace pulled out her phone and showed Clara a photograph of the Huntington's disease research facility at Cedars-Sinai. Do you know what your husband's little research fund has accomplished? They're calling it a miracle cure. Gene therapy that can prevent Huntington's disease entirely. That's wonderful. It means no other families will have to suffer what yours did. It means my family's weakness is about to become public knowledge. Grace's voice turned venomous. For 3 generations, we've hidden the fact that Huntington's disease runs in our bloodline. We've built our reputation on strength, on genetic superiority, on being better than the common rabble. And now, thanks to your husband's bleeding heart and your pathetic crusade for justice, the entire world will know that the Castro family carries defective genes. The twisted logic was breathtaking. Grace was more concerned about genetic embarrassment than the lives that could be saved by the research. You killed him, Clara said quietly. You found out about his diagnosis, and you murdered your own son. Grace's mask of composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something feral underneath. Daniel was dying anyway. His illness was progressing rapidly, and he was becoming increasingly erratic. He was talking about confessing everything to federal authorities, about exposing our business arrangements, about destroying everything our family had built. So, you decided to speed up his death. I decided to save my family from the destruction he was planning. Grace leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. A few extra medications mixed into his daily pills. Compounds that accelerated his neurological decline. He died thinking his disease had simply progressed faster than expected. He never knew his own mother had killed him. The casual admission of filicide was delivered with the same tone Grace might use to discuss the weather. Clara realized she was sitting across from someone who had moved so far beyond normal human emotion that murder was just another business decision. The FBI has evidence of the medication tampering. Dr. Webster confirmed it. Dr. Webster suffered a fatal car accident this morning in Malibu. Tragic, really. Such a dedicated researcher. Grace's smile was sharp as broken glass. And Agent Fisher's contact in the lab, the one who provided the toxicology evidence? Heart attack during his morning jog. Very sad for a man so young. More murders. Grace had spent the morning systematically eliminating everyone who could testify about Daniel's poisoning. The web of death surrounding this woman seemed to have no end. You can't kill everyone who knows the truth. I don't need to kill everyone, just you. Grace reached into her purse and pulled out a small vial filled with clear liquid. This is concentrated insulin. When injected into a pregnant woman, it causes immediate diabetic shock and cardiac arrest. The baby dies within minutes, and the mother follows shortly after. Medical examiners will find elevated blood sugar levels consistent with gestational diabetes complications. Clara's vision blurred with terror. You're going to murder a baby. I'm going to erase the last trace of my son's weakness from this world. Grace pulled out a syringe and began filling it with the deadly insulin. The Castro bloodline ends tonight, and with it, any claim you have to our fortune. The fortune is already mine. The courts confirmed it. Courts can be appealed. Verdicts can be overturned, especially when the primary witness is dead and new evidence emerges about her mental instability and criminal behavior. Grace capped the syringe and stood up. I've spent the past 2 months creating a narrative about your deteriorating mental health, your desperate attempts to steal money from a grieving family, your history of manipulation and fraud. By the time I'm finished, you'll be remembered as a pathetic gold digger who got in over her head and took her own life rather than face justice. As Grace approached, Clara felt the baby moving frantically inside her, as if her child could sense the approaching danger. She thought about Daniel's letters, about his desperate attempts to protect them both from his family's cruelty. She thought about all the people who had died because they tried to help her seek justice. Wait, Clara said, pressing herself back into the chair. There's something you need to know about your son's will, something the FBI doesn't know yet. Grace paused, syringe in hand. What are you talking about? Daniel didn't just leave me money and property. He left me controlling interest in Castro Industries. 51% of the company stock transferred to me the week before he died. The lie came easily, delivered with enough conviction to make Grace hesitate. In reality, Clara owned 49%, just short of controlling interest. But Grace didn't know that. That's impossible. I would have known about such a transfer. He used offshore holding companies and shell corporations to hide the transaction. The same methods your family has been using to launder money for decades. Clara pulled out her phone, which she'd programmed with fake financial documents before Grace arrived. The paperwork was filed in the Cayman Clarins under corporate names that can't be traced back to the Castro family. Grace stared at the phone screen, her face going pale as she processed the implications. If Clara truly owned controlling interest in Castro Industries, then killing her would trigger a legal investigation that would expose every aspect of the family's criminal enterprise. Even if that were true, your death would transfer those shares to your estate. And since you have no family, they'd eventually revert to the state. Not exactly. Clara's voice grew stronger as she played her final card. My will specifies that all Castro Industry shares should be donated to the Huntington's Disease Research Foundation. If anything happens to me, 51% of your criminal empire would become the property of medical researchers who are very interested in publishing their findings about genetic diseases and the families who try to hide them. The syringe trembled in Grace's hand. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd killed for, would be handed over to the very people she was trying to silence. You're lying. Call your lawyers. Have them check the corporate filings in Georgetown. See for yourself. Clara stood up slowly, her hand never leaving her belly. Or better yet, kill me and find out what happens when the world's leading Huntington's researchers get access to your family's business records. For 30 seconds, the apartment was silent, except for the sound of traffic on the street below and the tick of the wall clock Daniel had given her for their first anniversary. Grace stood frozen, caught between her desire for revenge and the realization that murder might destroy everything she was trying to protect. Finally, she lowered the syringe. What do you want? Victor, confession? An end to the killing in exchange for what? Your life and your family's company. Clara pulled out her phone and dialed 911. This is L.A. McFarland. I'm at 447 South Vermont Avenue, apartment 3B. The fugitive, Grace Olson, is here and ready to surrender to federal authorities. Grace could have attacked her then, could have tried to inject the insulin before police arrived. Instead, she sank back into the chair and began to laugh. It was a sound devoid of humor, empty of everything except exhausted defeat. You know what the truly hilarious part is? Grace said as sirens began wailing in the distance. Daniel always said, you were stronger than we gave you credit for. Even on his deathbed, he kept talking about how you'd surprise us all someday. He was right. Yes, he was. When FBI agents burst through the door 6 minutes later, they found Grace Olson sitting calmly in the living room, the syringe and insulin vial placed neatly on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. She surrendered without resistance, offering her wrists for handcuffs with the dignity of someone who had finally accepted that the game was over. 2 months later, Clara gave birth to her son in the maternity ward at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She named him Daniel Castro McFarland, ensuring that his father's memory would live on in a child who would grow up free from genetic disease and family hatred. The Castro criminal empire had been completely dismantled. Alex Nicholson and Victor Quintana were serving life sentences without the possibility of parole. Grace Olson had pleaded guilty to 17 counts of murder, including the poisoning of her own son in exchange for life imprisonment instead of the death penalty. Clara used her inheritance to establish the Daniel Castro Foundation for Genetic Disease Research, funding breakthrough treatments that saved thousands of lives worldwide. She also quietly donated $10 million to Michael Bennett's widow and children, honoring the man who had died trying to do the right thing. On a warm April morning, as she sat in the nursery, holding her healthy baby boy, Clara finally felt the peace that had been stolen from her on that terrible November day when everything changed. Her son gurgled contentedly in her arms, unaware that he was heir to a fortune built on justice rather than crime, love rather than hatred. Outside the window, Los Angeles stretched toward the Pacific Ocean. 8 million people living their lives under a sky that seemed brighter now that the Castro family shadow had been lifted from the city. Daniel's love had protected them both, even beyond death. And in the end, love had conquered everything. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So, don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind.